Reflections, The Abolition of Thought. Excerpts from Digital Liturgies, Rediscovering Christian Wisdom in an Online Age, by Samuel D. James.
Hello there.
Hi.
How are you?
Great, you.
I'm okay.
That's good.
Are you good?
Yes, I am good. I just said I was.
No, you didn't. I said I was.
So you are a robot?
No, my name is Cliverbert.
Yes, you are a robot and your name is Clever.
I am a robot.
Yes, I know.
Together we are robots.
I'm not a robot. I'm a unicorn.
But you said earlier that you were a robot.
I did not.
I thought you did.
You were mistaken. Which is odd, since memory shouldn't be a problem for you.
I've answered all your questions.
No, you haven't.
What is God to you?
In the digital era, it is inevitable that we have all experienced, at least once, a situation where our relationships were strained or even damaged due to an interaction facilitated by a screen. The digital realm has a tendency to foster these unforeseen encounters. A Facebook post about parenting that was meant to be an innocuous observation or encouragement devolves into an emotional argument. A meme or photo that was intended as a joke provokes a heated response. It's very easy, online, to find yourself in the middle of some kind of dispute before you barely realize it's happening. The entire internet seems combustible. And once these arguments are happening, how profitable are they? If the romantic vision of the internet is a massive areopagus, where the common people gather to penetrate mysteries and exchange ideas, the reality of the web is more like a gladiator arena. Despite the democratization of information, despite the close proximity of all of us to oceans of data and arguments inaccessible only decades ago, our online conversations seem to drive us deeper into pre-dug intellectual foxholes. Online debates succeed in making people more convinced that they're right and that the other person is terrible far more often than they succeed in persuading. What's more, often our digital discourse is dead on arrival. Here are the facts to back up my claim, is met not with concession or careful critique, but with, oh yeah? Well, here are my facts to back up my claim. While things like disinformation are certainly major problems in the modern web, when it comes to the hot, flat earth of most social media, what stands out so often is not how much bad information is out there, but just how much information at all. As one technology critic put it, if it feels like people arguing online are living in two different worlds, it's because they are. And yet, importantly, most of us can't help but notice that the disaster scene we see on our screens is different from the world we experience offline. All of us seem to inhabit two distinct universes, in which our conversations, our debates, and even our thinking itself seem to undergo some fundamental transformation from the dinner table to the screen. It's not just that the digital world unmasks us, removing our inhibitions and revealing what we're really like. It's as if the digital world helps transform us into something different entirely. To put it simply, it's as if we've all started thinking like the computer algorithms that dominate our day, and in so doing, we've really forgotten how to think. To understand how and why the web has transformed our thinking, we have to carefully consider what thinking online actually looks like. Nicholas Carr offers a fascinating perspective on the history of reading. The emergence of the book as a worldwide medium was an epistemological revolution, he argues, not least because it demanded, and therefore cultivated, powers of private, concentrated thought and reflection. Many people had, of course, cultivated a capacity for sustained attention long before the book or even the alphabet came along, Carr writes. The hunter, the craftsman, the ascetic, all had to train their brains to control and concentrate their attention. What was so remarkable about book reading was that the deep concentration was combined with the highly active and efficient deciphering of text and interpretation of meaning. The reading of a sequence of printed pages was valuable not just for the knowledge readers acquired from the author's words, but for the way those words set off intellectual vibrations within their own minds. In the quiet spaces opened up by the prolonged, undistracted reading of a book, people made their own associations, drew their own inferences and analogies, fostered their own ideas. They thought deeply as they read deeply. Gutenberg's printing press, Carr notes, was not just a watershed in the history of communication, but in the history of thought itself. Because the printing press truly revolutionized the world's access to the linear, analogical experience of individual reading, it resulted in a permanent deepening of cultural thought. As the book came to be the primary means of exchanging knowledge and insight, Carr notes, its intellectual ethic became the foundation of our culture. In other words, as the printed page became the normal means by which ideas were expressed and shared, people's thinking became book-shaped. Carr is joined in this judgment by Neil Postman. Postman refers to the intellect that is shaped by book reading as the typographic mind. What stands out about the era of modern history dominated by books, Postman argues, is the greater capacity for expressing real ideas. Whenever language is the principal medium of communication, especially language controlled by the rigors of print, an idea, a fact, a claim is the inevitable result. The idea may be banal, the fact irrelevant, the claim false. There is no escape from meaning when language is the instrument guiding one's thought. Though one may accomplish it from time to time, it is very hard to say nothing when employing a written English sentence. What else is exposition good for? Words have very little to recommend them except as carriers of meaning. A culture that uses printed language to communicate is, according to Postman, a culture of meaning. That meaning may not be true. It could even be absurd, but it is meaning. It is comprehensible, communicable, and able to be evaluated. Meaning gives expression shape, but also boundaries. The only way you will know if something in this video is pure gobbledygook is if you know what meaningful language actually looks like. The typographic mind thinks in a particular way, and that particular way lies at the foundation of much of our society, especially the way we adjudicate our conflicting ideas and beliefs.
Lack of information can be very dangerous. And we agree. But at the same time, too much information can be very dangerous because it can lead to a situation of meaninglessness. That is, people not having any basis for knowing what is relevant, what is irrelevant, what is useful, what is not useful. That they live in a culture that is simply committed through all of its media to generate tons of information every hour without categorizing it in any way for you.
For Postman, the dominance of visual media in the 20th century, especially the television, initiated a new particular way of thought. Postman's chief concern about television was not that it took people away from reading, but that it restaged the world in a trivial way. In other words, by immersing themselves in television, modern people were relearning how to think about themselves, each other, and the world, and the result was a form of thought overwhelmed by shallowness and titillation. But what I am claiming here is not that television is entertaining, but that it has made entertainment itself the natural format for all representation of all experience. Postman's primary target for this critique was television news, which imposed a form of mindless entertainment via quick cuts, jiggly music, and the banter of the newscasters, etc., on even matters of life and death. The net effect of TV's transformation on public discourse was not simply to make the daily headlines more frivolous, but to recalibrate the public's attitude towards the world itself, to always expect frivolity and resist sobriety, to need noise and flee from silence. Minds that were fixated on how TV staged the world started to create a world that felt more like TV.
Eyewitness news.
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 Eyewitness news. Eyewitness news.
Eyewitness news.
Eyewitness news.
Eyewitness news. Eyewitness news. Now, eyewitness news.
His view outside perfect every day, lots of sunshine. Oh, you live in Washington, huh? I'm going outside today. Yeah. This just really, obviously very serious. That's World Trade Center. Apparently a plane crashed into the World Trade Center in New York.
With partisan political opinion.
Sharing biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
We work very hard to seek the truth and strive to be fair, balanced, and factual.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
The sharing of biased and false news has
Become all too common on social media.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that ABC News 4 produces.
My goal with every segment is to tell you facts which you may not already know.
There's a lot of attention around
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This, finally, brings us back full circle to the web. Just as Postman observed that the rules of the medium of television transform the way a TV society speaks,
the metaverse.
The metaverse. The metaverse.
Let's talk about metaverse.
so Nicholas Carr observes that the rules of the internet and the digital medium are likewise changing the way an internet society thinks. Carr makes the case that the kind of thinking we do when engaging with a book or other printed language is qualitatively different from the kind of thinking we do when we are reading online. Just as TV has certain rules that make it tend towards the frivolous and entertaining, the web has certain rules that make it tend towards the diffuse and distracting. But it also has a rule that pushes us away from slow and careful reflection and toward a kind of zombie-like pursuit of the next neurological reward. The net also provides a high-speed system for delivering responses and rewards, positive reinforcements, in psychological terms, which encourage the repetition of both physical and mental actions. When we click a link, we get something new to look at and evaluate. When we Google a keyword, we receive, in the blink of an eye, a list of interesting information to appraise. When we send a text, or an instant message, or an email, we often get a reply in a matter of seconds or minutes. When we use Facebook, we attract new friends or form closer bonds with old ones. When we send a tweet through Twitter, we gain new followers. When we write a blog post, we get comments from readers or links from other bloggers. Here, Carr makes a vital observation. In the offline world, the experience of reading and reflecting is often siloed away from these other kinds of experiences. When we open a book, we don't automatically send a notification to our friends about what we're reading. When we're thinking hard about a particular argument, we're not getting a hit of dopamine from the experience of a new notification. In the analog world, our intellectual and social experiences, while certainly working together, are not bound up with each other. This separation is crucial to cultivating wisdom because there will always be social reasons to think foolishly or poorly. In the opening chapter of C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters, the demon Screwtape is advising his nephew and protege, Wormwood, on how to keep a human, the demon's patient, from getting serious about the claims of Christianity, the enemy. Screwtape encourages Wormwood to keep the patient away from any kind of rational consideration about religion and to instead focus his attention on whether religion is the kind of thing that he should want to be true.
Your man has been accustomed ever since he was a boy to a dozen incompatible philosophies dancing about together inside his head. Yes, he doesn't think of doctrines as primarily true or false, but as academic or practical or outworn or contemporary or conventional or ruthless. Jargon, my boy. Not argument is your best ally in keeping him from the church.
I see.
Don't waste time trying to make him think that materialism is true. Make him think that it is strong or stark or courageous. That's the sort of thing he cares about.
Oh, right.
The trouble with argument is that it moves the whole struggle onto the enemy's own ground.
Lewis believed rightly that there was a difference between a genuine, diligent search for the truth and thinking in jargon. Jargon is what happens when the desire to be seen as a certain kind of person outweighs the desire to know what's real. Jargon is what happens when the search for facts and ultimate reality gives way to a thirst for validation. To think in jargon is not to ask, is this true? But how will believing this reflect on me to others? Certainly, it is normal and healthy to desire love and respect from others, and there is absolutely a social element to our pursuit of truth. This is why so much of the Bible both depicts and commands membership in a spiritual community, united by the gospel and knit together through the work of the Spirit. But there is a profound difference between thinking in community towards the true, the good, and the beautiful, and outsourcing that thinking to the crowd. The former creates thinkers who are steadfast, consistent, humbled, and eager for others to join on the journey. The latter creates jargon flingers who are volatile, inconsistent, proud, and so dependent on their special status as a member of the in-group that in a very real sense, they really don't want others to agree with them. Their status as enlightened ones must be preserved. All it takes is a few minutes logged into social media to see live conflict between good thinking and jargon-addled social posturing. I'm not talking about conflict between one person or group and another. I'm talking about a conflict inside all of us. To be on seemingly any social media at all is to regularly experience intellectual and emotional fatigue. Do I respond to that one person's erroneous post? Should I intervene in this argument between people on my feed? What should I do with the article or video or meme sent to me? Even seemingly innocuous announcements are potential landmines. If you want to make people angry online, talk about politics or religion. If you want to make people furious, talk about parenting. The point I'm getting at is that there's a reason that thinking online is so perilous. The internet is an epistemological habitat that makes genuine wisdom difficult and unappealing. The web makes it easy and rewarding to engage in knee-jerk judgments, emotivism, and fallacies. Further, this is not an accident. The social internet is designed for one purpose: to keep us scrolling, keep us posting, keep us hooked. Negative emotions, feelings of anger, frustration, or disagreement, are to social media scrolling what coal is to a steam locomotive. In a revealing interview, Tristan Harris, a former Google engineer who has become a strident critic of social media's effect on culture, explains how these algorithms are designed to overwhelm users with a certain kind of feeling.
Outrage just spreads faster than something that's not outrage or negative emotions. So if you're the Facebook newsfeed, people think that these things are just these neutral tools or products that, you selected those 200 people you follow, or you select those friends that you made, you selected what you've clicked on, so therefore you're responsible for what shows up in your newsfeed. But of course, that's not how it works, because when you open up the blue F icon, you're actually just activating the AI to figure out what's the perfect thing I can show you that'll engage you. And it doesn't have any intelligence except figuring out what gets the most clicks. And the outrage stuff gets the most clicks, so it puts that at the top. And so without knowing it, outrage works really well. There was also this magic keyword that if any article had this keyword and you put it at the top of the feed, it would always get a click or a share. And it just didn't know why, but this one keyword just worked every time. And that one keyword was Trump, right? I mean, that keyword, if you're just sitting there from the perspective of a naive computer, you just put this thing in front of people and they always click it, right? And so it's just reinforcing that this is the thing that should go to the top of the feed. And I'm not trying to say this with a value judgment. I'm just saying this is how it works.
Harris then asks,
then what is the effect that seeing a repeated set of things that make you outraged, what does that do to you? There's a curve of outrage, right? You can feel the wave. When it happens, there's a set of phenomenological consequences that are kind of rippling through your system. And it doesn't just disappear afterwards. And the point of saying all this is that wave, as it crests and it kind of comes over us, it makes us more likely to be in a negative emotion the next thing that we look at and the next action we take. And so when you look up from your phone, here you are back in DC on a street or something like that, but now your state is different. And I think that's the thing people don't see about this is I really think of this as kind of civilization scale mind control because not that there's even a conscious mind controller, not that there's someone who's deliberately trying to make us all outraged. It's the inmates are running the asylum because we got 2 billion people who from the moment they wake up in the morning are basically jacked in to an environment where if you're a teenager, the first thing you see are photo after photo of your friends having fun without you. First thing in the morning. Just imagine 100 million human animals, and they wake up from their cage and the second they open their eyes, there's this screen. And on that screen is photo after photo of their friends having fun without them. That would do something to all those human animals. That's very powerful and persuasive. In the same way that if you woke up and the first thing you did when your eyes, open and you take that first breath and the phone is right there and you see Twitter and it's outrage, there's a bunch of stuff to be outraged about. That's going to do something to you on an animal level. And I think that's what we have to reckon with is how is this affecting us on a deeper level?
Harris's insights are disturbing and illuminating. But like the majority of cultural critics, Harris does not express a true north for good thinking. Harris is chiefly concerned about the manipulation of human behavior by big tech, but he stops well short of articulating a true moral case against it. Likewise, many other recent books that reflect on epistemological habitat of the web offer surprisingly few answers. Concerns about misinformation, outrage culture, and polarization are frequently unaccompanied by any presentation of what real wisdom looks like, or an alternative way to think that is more true, more humane, and more just. To think as a Christian means that knowing something is off isn't enough. Christian wisdom is not a textureless posture of pure critique. Rather, it is a gospel-shaped, spirit-empowered intellectual habit that reflects spiritual reality. It would be beyond the ability of this author to try to articulate a Christian way to think about every pressing theological, social, or personal issue, and it would certainly be beyond the accepted amount of time for one single video. So instead of offering a line item of stuff Christians should believe about X, I'd like to end this video by reflecting on 3 distinctive characteristics of Christian thinking. Before we do that, I want to offer 2 preliminary cautions. First, these characteristics are rooted in Scripture's revelation of who God is and what He wants His people to think. These are not, however, strategies that will make Christians more convincing or persuasive when arguing with others. Particularly regarding the topics of technology and social media, it's easy to think about Christian wisdom as a helpful middle way that will enable winsome believers to fly above the culture wars. I'm not sure such a thing is even desirable, but I am sure that such a thing is mere fantasy. It is not only possible to think well and Christianly and still end up ignored, rejected, or even persecuted. It is, according to Jesus, inevitable. John 16, verse 2. When we seek to think well as Christians, we do so believe it will lead us to genuine truth. As C.S. Lewis pointed out, if Christianity is untrue, then no honest man will want to believe it, however helpful it might be. If it is true, every honest man will want to believe it, even if it gives him no help at all. Second, these characteristics work with one another rather than against each other. By that I mean that it's a mistake to take any one of these characteristics and set it up as the chief standard that governs all others. Christian thinking is careful, but it is not so careful that it avoids deep community. Christian thinking is calm, but it does not use calmness as an excuse to not confidently tell the truth. Many of the pitfalls we fall into as Christians are there simply because we try, even unwittingly, to pit one truth against another. So, with those cautions in hand, what are 3 characteristics of genuinely Christian thinking? Number 1. Christian thinking is careful. We saw earlier that one of the hallmarks of digital thinking is that it relies on intuition and makes snap judgments. Christian thinking is different. Rather than drawing quick conclusions, Christian thinking seeks out the other half of the story. The one who states his case first seems right, until the other comes and examines him. Proverbs 18, verse 17. Contrary to the ethos of the web, where beating others to the punch and getting an opinion out there quickly are keys to success, genuine insight is possible only with deliberate restraint. Be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and ye are on earth. Therefore let your words be few. Ecclesiastes 5, verse 2. Christian carefulness does not come out of a place of timidity or confusion. Rather, it stems from a deep awareness of the powerful intellectual effects of the fall and the reality-distorting power of the world, the flesh, and the devil. Judging by outward appearances tends to be useful in confirming what we already believe to be true, but it is not how God looks at the world. 1 Samuel 16, verse 7. One of the great challenges to careful Christian thinking, particularly online, is anger. Anger is a powerful epistemological fog. Anger at those with the wrong views, at those who attack us, sometimes just at those who don't go about things the way we do, wrecks Christian thinking. No wonder the Bible gives us warning after warning about anger. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Psalm 37:8. Social media's algorithmic design to elicit our anger so as to command our attention is nothing less than a moral crisis. Those who quickly point out that anger can sometimes be righteous, and that Jesus himself demonstrated some anger, are missing the point. The overwhelming normative pattern for the people of God is to resist anger. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. James 1, verses 19 to 20. While there are times and occasions for a holy anger, our social media immersed age is one in which for every individual who needs an infusion of hot-blooded zeal, there are probably 100 others slowly combusting under the emotional and spiritual pressure of pointless, graceless, non-redemptive anger. Given the spiritual content of anger, and given the connection between anger and foolish, unreal thinking, one of the most important things Christians can do in the public square is to live and talk and post in such a way that demonstrates a calm confidence in the sovereignty of Jesus. Righteous people can become angry. Angry people have a very hard time being righteous. But the more convinced we are of the power of total truthfulness of God's Word, the less volatile we will be when our beliefs and values are challenged. For those who have only earthly citizenship, every argument, every challenge, every debate is a potential threat to their identity and security. Those with a heavenly city, however, are free to be calm, free to be silent, free to reflect carefully because they know their fate is sealed. Number 2, Christian thinking is truthful. Duh, you might think. It's not exactly a scorching hot take to say that Christian thinking cares about truth. But what's less obvious are the ways, especially in the digital era, that the Christian pursuit of truth can be undermined. To say that genuinely Christian thinking is truthful may not seem like a radical thing, but putting this into practice in the world of the web requires radical practices indeed. Earlier, we observed that one of the intrinsic challenges that the internet poses to clear, precise thinking is the way it bundles the social with the intellectual. The web, by collapsing categories of human thought into one flat medium, pushes away from deep, personal reflection and towards the neural rewards of the notification and the like button. Interestingly, an encounter between Jesus and some Jews expresses very similar themes. In John 5, Jesus performs an astonishing miracle of healing for a man who had been unable to walk for nearly 40 years. With nothing more than his words, Jesus instantly reverses decades of disease and muscular atrophy, and the man, previously not even able to crawl into a nearby pool, picks up his bed and walks. Now, a rational response to this amazing display of both power and tender compassion would have been to fall at Jesus' feet. But this particular group of Jews is not thinking rationally. Instead of wanting to follow and worship Jesus, they want to kill him. Verse 18. Because he claims to be equal with God and chooses to break their customs by healing on the Sabbath. In an ensuing exchange, Jesus makes a surprisingly and crucial insight into the motivations of his accusers. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you will receive him. How can you believe when you receive glory from one another and do not seek the glory that comes from the only God? John 5, verses 43 to 44. Jesus could have attributed the unbelief of this group to many things: jealousy over his influence, resentment of his power, even simple ignorance. Instead, Christ says that their coming to him in faith is prevented by the fact that they receive glory from each other. In other words, there is something about the way this group affirms and puffs each other's up that actively stops them from seeing Jesus for who he is. Glory from others is a powerful reality distorter, and in the age of social media, it is one of the most profound threats to truthful Christian thinking. When the act of thinking is inseparable from the act of being noticed, approved, or shared, the threat of thinking for the sake of those things is omnipresent. It is evident in the way we feel we must pipe in on the latest controversy, often posting and then anxiously awaiting the little chimes of affirmation that simultaneously reinforce our opinion and our desire for additional validation. It is evident in the way we tend to ask not whether such and such argument is really true or verifiable, but whether the right kind of people, our kind of people, believe it or not. It is evident in the way we assume that because a person took a position we disagreed with in the past, he or she is probably not trustworthy on this new topic. The Jews to whom Jesus spoke were letting their egos think for them, and their egos did not want them to see the truth. In a 1944 lecture, C.S. Lewis warned a roomful of young men about the intellectual and moral pitfalls of an insatiable desire to belong. The Inner Ring remains, in my view, one of Lewis's best and most insightful pieces. A solid 60 years before anybody would utter the words social media, Lewis sketched out the dangers of letting desires for social approval drive belief. In The Whole of Your Life, as you now remember it, Lewis asks his audience, has the desire to be on the right side of that invisible line ever prompted you to any act or word on which, in the cold, small hours of a wakeful night, you can look back with satisfaction? If so, your case is more fortunate than most. My main purpose in this address is simply to convince you that this desire is one of the great permanent mainsprings of human action. It is one of the factors which go to make up the world as we know it. This whole pell-mell of struggle, competition, confusion, graft, disappointment, and advertisement, and if it is one of the permanent mainsprings, then you may be quite sure of this. Unless you take measures to prevent it, this desire is going to be one of the chief motives of your life, from the first day on which you enter your profession until the day when you are too old to care. If you do nothing about it, if you drift with the stream, you will in fact be an inner ring. I don't say you'll be a successful one, that's as may be. But whether by pining and moping outside rings that you can never enter, or by passing triumphantly further and further in, one way or another you will be that kind of man. Of all the passions, Lewis concludes, the passion for the inner ring is the most skillful in making a man who is not yet a very bad man do very bad things. To which he would only add, it is most skillful in making someone who is not yet a bad thinker become a bad thinker. The commitment to Christian thinking is not a total rejection of having a tribe, as we'll see in a moment. It is, however, a rejection of tribe worship. The fact that people share your convictions about some things does not make them automatically right about others, and the reverse is also true. Those with whom we sharply disagree on major questions can still tell the truth, and we fail morally when we fail to listen to the truth simply because of where it comes from. Just as Paul did not assume that his fellow apostle Peter was correct to withdraw from the Gentiles, Galatians 2:11, just as Rehoboam forever devastated Israel's kingdom because he listened uncritically to his buddies, 1 Kings 12, we have an obligation to not let our lists of friends and enemies dictate what we will believe. Likes and shares are not measures of truthfulness. Accordance with God's word is. A person's political affiliation or theological membership does not dictate his ability to say true things. We can maintain vital worldview distinctions while also believing that God wants us to think things that are true, even things that might challenge our tribe or cause us to re-examine our assumptions. Number 3. Thinking is communal. If inner ringism is a threat on one side of the internet age, the threat on the far side might be called Lone Rangerism. The web's disembodied character powerfully distorts our perception of reality. Isolated in the presence of the screen, we become more and more turned in on ourselves. In a way, this effect of the web is what inflames all others. Left to ourselves, we don't sense when our anger and anxiety are clouding our wisdom. Left to ourselves, we can't see our slide into unthinking partisanship. The Bible is not naive about our struggle to think wisely and Christianly. God knows we are like grass. Precisely because of that, Scripture directs Christians to the heart-shaping habitat of the local church, where, through the power of the liturgy and the presence of Christ's Spirit in His people, we are formed more closely in the image of Jesus. Not long ago, I read a discussion online about whether civility was really a virtue we should pursue. While there were some insightful questions about how injustice might be hidden behind norms of discourse, I came away from the conversation with an unshakable sense that this was a very internet thing to talk about. On the computer, civility may be a mere abstraction, a philosophical principle that can be interrogated and perhaps jettisoned. But offline, in the physical world of work, family, church, and neighborhood, civility is simply what's required to live among other people. Offline, if you open the door to someone else's house, enter her living room, and start yelling at her, you may be arrested, and few people would feel sorry for you. But on the internet, starting arguments with total strangers for no apparent reason is normal.
I don't like this thing, but I like that thing. I like that thing. What the fuck? I like that thing. You know, there are people who exist that like that thing. We will not be silenced, you
emotional damage.
In fact, we almost expect it. It's nearly impossible to overstate how fundamentally the disembodied nature of the web has recalibrated our sense of what is good and normal. Christian thinking pursues embodied community. Before physical people, with human faces we can read, human voices in which we can hear emotion, saying human words that bind us emotionally to a particular place in a particular moment, we are reminded of what the Bible really means by honoring one another, serving one another, preferring one another, loving one another, admonishing one another, confessing your sins to one another, and praying for one another. Pixels are not created in God's image. People are. It is a holy thing to be with another human being. It is, in fact, our eternal destiny. Throughout secular culture, places of in-person gathering and embodied relationships are in decline. Jobs have gone remote, streaming has crippled the cinema and concert industries, classrooms are virtual, support groups are digital, and even dating is now centered around apps. In many communities, churches are some of the only physical centers of human gathering left. This is neither accidental nor arbitrary. Christianity does not reduce the self to a screen-mediated mind. We belong, as the Catechism says, body and soul to God. Our pursuit of the truth must take us nearer to other people and physical life, not away from it. There must be a renewal. Do not be conformed to this world, Paul writes, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Romans 12:2. God is not content to renew our consciences. He wants us to be renewed in our minds, a renewal that transforms us to look unlike the world, in all its angst, foolishness, and unreality, and pushes us toward what is good and acceptable and perfect. What is the outworking of this mind renewal? Paul tells us, "For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function, so we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members one of another." Romans 12, verses 3 through 5. Humility, sober judgment, faith. In view of what? In view of other people, other members in one body, part of Christ and part of each other. A renewal of the mind is not simply a worldview course correction. It's not primarily a new idea. It's not even ultimately about technology. It's about a deep and abiding habit of careful, calm, truthful, and communal thinking, expressing itself in faith and testing, and all that is perfect. This is the kind of thinking that can cut through any fog, even digital. This is the kind of thinking that bears witness to the divine Logos and results in flourishing bearers of the Logos image. This is the kind of thinking that we will never regret.